Paul Hodgkins of Florida received an 8-month sentence for his role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol, despite prosecutors' request that he be sentenced to more than twice that time. So could this case factor in the sentencing of other Capitol rioters in the coming months? Joining us now to discuss, Joseph D. McBride, attorney for Richard Bigo Barnett, seen here in a widely circulated image from the January 6th attack, sitting in a chair in House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office. Mr. McBride, what's your reaction to yesterday's 8-month sentence? Does that seem fair to you?
I'm not going to get into whether or not it seems fair. Good morning, by the way. What I can say is there appears to be 3 categories of defendants who will be sentenced at this point. You have the misdemeanor trespasser or illegal protester. You have an individual like Mr. Hodgkins who made it into sort of the Senate chamber, into the Holy of Holies during that time, during that sacred event. And then you have people who conspired to be violent and or were violent that day. Obviously, those people have not been sentenced yet. When you look at the sentencing that happened yesterday in light of Richard Barnett, it's not too far of a jump to see that Richard did not make it into the Holy of Holies. He did not make it into the Senate chamber. He was also not violent that day. So in terms of analyzing it, where he might come out on this, if an appropriate offer were to be made, it would have to be something in the realm of misdemeanor protest, trespassing with probation, like Miss Morgan Lloyd was sentenced to, unlike Mr. Hodgkins.
Right.
Definitely
well, obviously, your client did not make it into the Senate chamber. He did make it into the Speaker's office, of course. You acknowledge that, because that's just a matter of fact. So let's just talk about one of the judge's rationale, though, if you want to draw a parallel between this sentence. She cited specifically the fact that he pled guilty early. He showed sincere remorse and that he recognized that Joe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States. Has your client expressed remorse? And does he recognize Joe Biden as the legitimate president of the United States?
Sure. Well, obviously, this is an ongoing criminal case, an active criminal case. So I can't get into his state of mind, prior state of mind or current state of mind. What I can say about the situation is that my client believes that his actions were protected by the First Amendment of the United States, that he showed up to peacefully protest, to petition this government for redress, along with throngs of other citizens. We all know what happened that day.
Just so I'm clear, are you saying that attacking the Capitol is, according to yourself and your client, an extension of First Amendment rights?
No, I am saying that there are people who showed up to attack the Capitol, there are people who showed up to protest, and there are people who showed up to protest that got involved with the greater events of that day. And it is very important not to lump everybody in, not to define every protester that showed up that day as an insurrectionist, which, by the way, no one has been charged with. Jeffrey Toobin, one of your own legal analysts, has said that insurrection should not be used in this case. It is not appropriate. My client has not been charged with insurrection. My client was not violent that day. My client showed up to protest. Mr. Barnett has no criminal record, showed up to protest peacefully, ended up in the office that day. That does not equivocate to an attack on democracy.
Well, I think showing up to protest and somehow winding up in the Speaker's office seems to be a very different standard. You don't enter the Speaker's office as part of a violent mob and just sort of wind up there willy-nilly. I think there's a clear difference in that point. But I want to press you on something that you've said. You wrote an essay for LinkedIn in which you said this. Like the Gestapo did in Nazi Germany, the federal government is targeting anyone who dares criticize the decision-making process, questions its motives, or challenges its legitimacy. Look, Nazi comparisons are usually a sign you've lost the argument, but do you still believe the federal government is acting like Nazi Germany in its prosecution of the Capitol attackers?
Look, let's leave Nazis out of this conversation.
Well, you brought them into it, sir.
Prove a point.
You brought them into it.
Okay, fair enough. Like the Nazis, like the Soviets in the Gulag, innocent men and women are being held in what we are calling D.C. Guantanamo Bay, pre-trial, absent any finding of fact. Pre-trial, they're being held for hundreds of days in solitary confinement. They're being beaten. They're being starved. They're being denied medical care. They're being denied the right to worship. They're being cut off from their attorneys. They're being cut off from
Mr.
their
McBride,
family.
first of all, has he been denied the right to communicate with you? Has your client been denied the right to communicate with you?
My client is out. I got Mr. Barnett out. Because
I just want to be clear about that because you're making extraordinary things. These sentences in the decision of the Biden Justice Department not to charge insurrection would indicate this is nothing resembling anything involving Soviet Russia or Nazi Germany, obviously. But to belabor that point, you went on a Russian television station to plead this case and make this point. Do you think if an attacker broke into the Kremlin and sat at Vladimir Putin's desk, he'd be treated better or worse than your client's been treated after attacking the Speaker of the House's office?
If the media and the United States government does not want to hold itself accountable for the human rights violations that are taking place at D.C. Guantanamo Bay, then who better to hold us accountable than the inventors of the gulags themselves? That is why I went there, to prove
that makes
a point.
Absolutely
America
no sense,
needs to wake up and understand that people are being tortured. Are you okay with people being tortured?
What's the example you have, sir? Would you like to cite
the White House right now?
Pardon me? You're saying people are being tortured by the White House. I just want to be clear, because that's an extraordinary statement that would seem to be utterly unbased in fact.
Oh, no, they are based in fact. And when the truth about the circumstances of confinement comes out, you should hold yourself accountable for what you're saying right now.
Do you think people should be held accountable for attacking the Capitol and trying to overturn an election, sir?
Tortured. Are you okay with torture? Are you okay with what the
What about
ACLU
the Capitol Police who were tortured and attacked by the violent mob, sir? Does that bother you?
Solitary confinement is torture. Solitary confinement is torture. Answer that question for me, good sir. Are you okay with pretrial detainees being tortured?
Mr. McBride, you seem awfully unconcerned with the violence done to the Capitol Hill Police, with the violence done to the Capitol, with the attempt to overturn an election by an insurrectionist mob. Does that concern you at all? Should there be accountability for that, Mr. McBride?
No one has been charged with insurrection.
Were they trying to overturn the certification of the election, Mr. McBride? Was your client trying to overturn and stop the certification of the election?
Absolutely not. Without any shadow of a doubt, my client showed up to protest what he believed at the time to be incorrect election results.
Does he still believe that? Do you believe that?
Rights. He is. Look, my belief is not at issue here. The good sir from Georgia, Mr. Vernon Jones, who is running for governor in Georgia at this moment, why don't you go talk to him and others like him?
I'm talking to you right now, but you know what it sounds like, Mr. McBride? It sounds like you and your client still believe the big lie.
The big lie? What does that mean? 75 million people
means
believe
lying
that the big
about
lie
the results of the election. Mr. McBride, I want to thank you for coming on New Day, but I hope you would have more of a fact-based conversation with anything resembling a sense of perspective about an attack on our Capitol. Joseph McBride, keep yelling torture. We'll stick with the facts. Thank you very much for joining us on New Day.
The facts are torture.